This isn't working, right? All right. Good morning. I have let's get my notes going here. All right. Well, see how this works. All right. My name's Ricardo. The theme is action, and I'm going to be talking about the art of projection mapping. I'm the creative director and co-founder of Clip Collective, which is formed here in Philly in 2003. And since then, we have grown from 2 people with the idea of taking projection art out of the gallery and into more common spaces to a full-blown creative production studio in Northern Liberties. We've worked with some of the nation's best ad agencies, and I've shown our work in an artistic capacity throughout the world. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the process and what we do and what I do. And if we could, yeah, I guess the lights. A lot of my videos are dark, so hopefully we can see, because I do everything at night. I'm going to talk about what projection mapping is and the process, and then show some examples of work, of our work. So what is projection mapping? Projection mapping is something that I kind of came up with, oh, geez, what year is it? I did my first projection map piece in a bathtub in 1998. And it played on VHS, if that's any indication of how old I am and what I've been doing. And I've gotten a few patents on it, and I wanted to talk about what projection mapping is. And it's funny, I looked it up on Wikipedia, which is kind of funny, and I really didn't like the definition, so I came up with my own. So I see projection mapping as a technique which utilizes video projection to transform an object or space by manipulating the illuminated pixels through software. And now that I read it, it's just as bad as the wiki entry. Very technical. So I'm going to kind of get into more of what it has done for me as an artist, this process, because it is a process, and it's a different way of looking at things, different way of using video tools, because I kind of, you know, I wanted to be a video artist in college, and I got really frustrated seeing, I would go to like a museum and see video art on the you know, on the list of work, and I'd go and run and see it, and it'd just be like weird esoteric video on a black TV on a pedestal, and it was really disappointing. So I kind of started playing with projections, and I realized that I could actually transform a space by illuminating it with video, which is really cool. And then, you know, utilizing software, I was able to start really forming the pixels and what I was projecting on. And I kind of love this slide. This is from a 17th century etching that I pulled from Edmund Bacon's Design of Cities, which is a really awesome book. Edmund Bacon, a favorite Philadelphia son, and his son's kind of famous, Kevin Bacon's dad. But I love this slide because it really shows kind of what I have to deal with all the time in my process. You know, me being the cool dude in the shawl there, and the face up there is kind of like where the projector usually is. And that's kind of the process that I go through when I'm creating this work, because the cool thing about projection mapping is that it's not something that you create on your computer and then you go somewhere and just project it. A lot of it has to do with what you're projecting upon. And that process is really important to me, and I think it really informs the work. You know, I always say what you're projecting on is just as important as what you're projecting. And if you know, the way I do it is that's always at the seed of the creative is that process. And this is another etching from that book from Edmund Bacon, which really, like, I remember finding this book when I first started Clip, and I was like, wow, this is like everything. He really sums up the process for me. And there was this weird esoteric thing, apprehension, representation, realization, which is what this slide is called. And it's kind of interesting, like, the apprehension, that's kind of me taking in what I'm doing, what I'm going to project on. The representation, and I love that it's just plain here, because when I work on a computer and you're using the technology, it's flat. But what we're making is three-dimensional and real. So I love this slide because it really represents the process of projection mapping, but it's 17th century. Like, what do the tools look like now? That's what my tools look like. Look familiar? That's not a t-shirt. That's an actual, that's the pen tool from After Effects that I just put on Kevin's back and then took a photo of it because I thought it was funny. But it really kind of sums it up. I love Adobe so much. They've like totally changed my life because with that tool, I was able to really start shaping space. So projection mapping, I have a time-lapse video. Come on. This is an installation I did in our studio years ago, but I love this time-lapse because you can kind of, it really demonstrates the process of manipulating real space and objects with illuminated pixels. And you can see how I'm just kind of masking and cutting. So tedious, but it's very gratifying. It's kind of fun. And you can see once I have all that information, I'm able to do things with it. And I'm going to kind of, you're able to do this, which is animating the inanimate. And I think that's how this ties into action. It's really cool. Like, I can take something that's completely static and, you like that? That's funny. You can animate the inanimate. And I'm going to show you some examples. This is one of my older reels, but it kind of has some good examples. I'll get into this piece more later. Man, I wish it was darker. That's a tub that I kind of on. These are sculptural pieces that were interactive. See how really bring things to life, and even space with like smoke. I really like injecting all this movement and color into space. This was at the flower show a few years ago. That's the New York Public Library. Actually scared a bunch of Polish terrorists. Tourists. That was kind of funny. I said terrorists. Maybe I need more coffee. Flower show again. We like those guys. We like helping them out. So you can see how just using your basic video techniques, you can bring a space to life. That was the Bethesda Terrace, Central Park. We did a whole piece in Central Park about the space. This was cool. This was like a 14-foot tall owl sculpture that we did for Adult Swim that we brought to life at this crazy upfront party in New York. And we had a lot of fun kind of creating all these interesting animations on the owl. I'm going to get more into this later, but this was a piece called What's He Building in there that showed up at Sundance. I love that piece. You're going to see that again. I apologize for the repeats, but I'm doing it. You can see how we can transform a simple space. This was a piece I did in St. Petersburg, Russia. Just black and white show, so I did all this cool op art, just kind of bringing the space to life. And that was an in-studio set for a music video to the band Sun Airway, which I love. One of my favorite music videos. So that's like a quick reel of some of the pieces I've done in the past. So, what's he building in there? And I love showing this because beyond projection mapping and the technique is like, how do you make this cool? A lot of you probably have seen some projection mapping pieces out in the world. I always joke about how novel it was when it first started happening. Bouncing balls on buildings, buildings falling down, like very novel. And what I love about this piece and about Shari Freelo, who's the curator of the New Frontier at Sundance, when she asked me to do a piece at the festival that year, she challenged me. And it's so awesome when you meet people like that challenge you, that believe in you, yet push you. And her challenge for me was to take this cool thing that I'm doing and tell a story. And that's something I had been wanting to do. I do so much commercial work where there's like much room for story. So it was a great challenge, and this was the space. That's actual gallery space that all the other kind of work was for New Frontier was within. So at night, my piece was outside of it. It was the exterior. So what's he building in there, based on the Tom Waits song, was kind of this, you know, it was kind of a parable of a man tending to his meat machine. If you notice, the patrons of New Frontier, the gallery, which was inside, walk into these smashers. That's where the entrance was, and it kind of turns them into these bales of meat, and then are fed into this weird pit. That's kind of awesome. They like let me. I mean, it was like Sundance. I could be weird and quirky and dark. It was such a. I went nuts, obviously. So he tends this machine and is terrorized by these grotesque characters. You'll see later. There's like a cow tongue that we animated, and he spends all his time kind of tending this machine. It's cool. You know, I pull the walls down so you can see within the building, and using the building itself, the architecture as a set and a stage. There's the cow tongue. That was real fun doing stop motion. It was really gross. It was really cool. It was really fun. Yeah, we did this. We made all of this in Northern Liberties in our studio. We combined a lot of video techniques, stop motion, all kinds of stuff. And it's funny, the parable is like he's constantly tending this machine, but at the end of his ultimate demise was the machine itself. It puts him in the munchers, he turns into a bale of meat, and then the machine reconstitutes him, and then the claw comes and puts him back in his seat, and then the loop would happen again. So it was this funny like loop of like him doing this over and over and over, and it was kind of a allegory for my life and work. But I love it. It was really cool. So that's like, if you had to take everything I've done and throw it away and keep one thing, that's the one thing. I love that piece. Not to downplay some of the other work I've done, but that one came from here, and it was really great to do that on a large stage. So the next piece I'm going to show you is what I call Meadow version 1.0, which is an installation we did probably like 3 years ago. This was in Philly. It was for the Switched On Garden, put on by Joe Patitucci and the Data Garden guys, which was like a electronic outdoor arts and music fest. And he asked if I wanted to do something, and there's this great meadow in Bartram's Garden, which this was, and I was like, I had this thing happen to me a few years ago where I threw out my back, and I was like totally laid up, and you know, you get really depressed when that happens. And I remember I went on a walk in the Wissahickon with my wife and kid to kind of get my back kind of back in order. And I remember walking through the Wissahickon and just like having this idea that I've always kind of had, but it kind of was like, man, I wish I could do a series of installations in the woods. And I had all these ideas like, oh, it could be like a breadcrumb trail, and then you could come to this clearing, and there'd be like these smoke projections in the meadow, and then there could be some other thing at the end of it. And I was like, that was never happened in the Wissahickon. Anyway, well, Joe came to me and asked if I wanted to do this, and I saw the meadow, and I was like, oh, I have this idea for it. So we created the meadow, which was basically 2 projectors rear projecting onto a 100-foot wide veil of smoke that we shot up into the air above the meadow. And we kind of had this idea of like these fireflies just kind of chilling there. And what was great is like all these people were at Bartram's enjoying all this music and art, and this was kind of at the end of the night, and this was at kind of the exit, so people had to leave the park and they would see this. And I built it for that perspective. But what happened, which was really awesome, was when people came out, they walked right into the frickin' installation, like right in the middle of it, and we're surrounded by it. And at first I was like, no, that's not the way you're supposed to do it. But then I was like, that's awesome, because then they kind of became a part of the work. And that really resonated with me. And that's what I love about this creative process, is like when those, you know, accidents happen, you know, to take hold of those accidents and really do something with it. I love that part. Like, totally Spielberg. So then, yeah, the lights would then kind of dance to the music and kind of go with it. Pretty cool. So anyway, I did this. It was cool, and my friends at the flower show saw this, and they forwarded it to the executive director at Longwood Gardens, and they saw it, and they had just finished the Bruce Monroe exhibit, Their Light, and they were interested in doing more light installations. So after they saw this, they called their studio, they came to our studio, we talked, showed them a bunch of stuff, and they were like, would you be interested in doing a series of installations at Longwood? This is like 2 years ago. I was like, yeah, yes, please. So we started going down to Longwood and started discussing something that we could do down there, which is kind of why I brought up the whole like throwing out my back and going down the Wissahickon thing. This was an opportunity to kind of realize that idea of a series of installations that people could walk through. And that was really the inspiration for that. So about 1.5 years ago, we penned a deal with Longwood to create a series of installations, and we started planning it. And the thing with that was, I told them, I was like, look, if you want us to do this, we're gonna need at least 1 year to start putting this together. So this is a compilation of like the behind the scenes of us working there for over 1 year. Like every month, we'd pack up a cube truck full of equipment, projectors, generators, computers, all that stuff, all the gag. And we'd truck down to Longwood and spend a whole night, sundown to sunup, experimenting in all these spaces. Longwood ended up being a series of 9 installations plus. And you know, I couldn't go in there before the show started and just do it all. I needed to experiment. All these years I've been working with hard objects, sculptures, spaces, real things, hard things. Plants is a whole other game. And I needed that time to really commune with the space and the areas that we were creating installations in, not only for the projections, but for the music. It's a completely original score. I brought a lot of the composers with me on a lot of these trips. One of them actually wrote the main song, like, out there, which is really cool. But it was important for me to have the time to experiment in the space and see what would work and what wouldn't work, what, you know, most importantly, what wouldn't work, and failing in a bubble, but seeing what accidents would happen and then holding on to those accidents. So I would go in there, I'd try a bunch of stuff. I actually had, the reason why I have all this footage, because I always had my videographer with me to document everything that we were doing, so that when I got back to the studio and I'm looking at this flat thing, remember the flat thing, that's my computer, being able to translate what we were doing during our experiment phase, and make actual decisions based on what was actually happening on the plans. Because as you can see, and I'll get into this later, I had to develop a whole different visual language for what worked onto these really insane objects. I mean, nature's insane. The Longwoods curated such an amazing canvas of living bodies that, you know, it was quite a bear to get through, but I gotta tell you, it was an awesome run. It was such a fun trip. Like that, you know, going there once a month, I always look forward to it. It was such a cool thing to do. Also, being at Longwood at night when no one's there is really awesome. So yeah, we spent 1 year making all these pieces, and I would do each section by each section, and then I'd have something to work with. And then fast forward to this past June, we actually went in and started installing everything permanently. So I actually had somewhere to work with each thing. And so I spent the whole month of June going through and doing these installations. And just curious, how many here have been to Nightscape? Okay, you guys gotta go. I'm gonna show some pieces of the finished work. I really wish these lights weren't on. These lights are killing me. Go see it in person. It's an experiential thing. I just want to, yeah, just do it. Yeah, get rid of that one too, because this is awesome. And you might want to turn this up a little bit, because the music's, this is a super cut of most of the installations. I love this piece so much. Like my team, I mean, just under 50 people worked on this. Oh, don't do that. There you go. Just under 50 people worked on this. This was like producing a feature-length film. It was quite an undertaking. But it's a completely original work. It's the biggest piece that we've ever done as far as scale is concerned. I mean, it takes you know, they say 90 minutes is enough time to go through it, but I don't even think that's enough. Several people have gone multiple times to see the work. There's all kinds of, see, it's awesome, right? It's really cool. There's so many like nooks and crannies, and the beauty of this installation is the exploration of it, that there's no beginning, middle, or end. You can start anywhere, and I guarantee you, if you go multiple times, you'll see things you didn't see the first time. So I'm going to play this clip. Okay, turn it up. This is cut to one of the songs at the Large Lake. So there's several installations here. This is the Large Lake. I love this. This is like this tunnel where you walk through. You can see, like, I'm just projecting kind of order on the chaos. And what happens when you do that is you get all these beautiful undulations that happen from the chaos of the organic matter that we're projecting. And these are like shots that just like look up randomly places. Some things were more formal, you know, like I said, it's what you're projecting on and not just what you're projecting. That's important. So I would create a lot of content based on this marquee of plants. Along with it's so great. I remember talking to them and they were like, what plants do you want in this area? I'm like, really? You're asking me what plants? Okay. That really trippy star thing's awesome. I want that. And it's great. What's great about this piece is that, it's, like I said, it's a series. So I was able to do a lot of different things here. This is what I call the legacy tree. This is old. What kind of tree is it again? Sephora tree. Where we actually map the tree. And, you know, a lot of people are like, how do you map things that are growing? I'm like, this thing's like 100 years old. That bark's not moving. The trunk is not moving. This is another shot from the Large Lake, which is a crowd favorite. Everyone loves the Large Lake. It's really large. I mean, I'm projecting on hundreds of trees. This was probably the hardest piece within this installation to do because it was so chaotic what I was projecting on. It was very difficult. This went through. I mean, we didn't finish this piece till like 2 weeks before the open. Really, I like changed everything. This is the topiary. This piece is really great because it's so musical. And, you know, this is a musical place during it, but it really kind of comes to life. I always saw the topiary as this kind of frozen procession. So that's what we did with it. We made all these instruments that play the song. In the stage. It's really majestic. I love. This is probably my favorite of all pieces. It's just really. And then the other thing I did is a lot of ambient. There's like ambient modes and active modes. And this shows the ambient mode, which is kind of like I also saw the topiary as this kinetic sculpture garden. So I wanted to make these like, I wanted to have these like big moving stone animated sculptures. It's awesome. So cool working with this. And then we also worked inside the conservatory. There's 3 installations inside the conservatory. And here it was interesting because I wanted to create kind of remixes of what was in there. A re-examination of everything we did outside, but inside. And this was an actual sculpture that we worked with Longwood on, where we made this giant orb that we projected on. And, you know, they clad it with all kinds of organic material. This is the Silver Garden, another one of my favorite pieces here. I mean, you could spend 30 minutes, at least 40 minutes, in the Silver Garden alone and still see new things throughout. It's chock full of little beautiful moments. I mean, I walked in there, it was like all gray plants. I was like, yes, this is perfect for projection. And a lot of really beautiful things happen. And one thing I started noticing in here was, you know, back to that visual language and developing new tricks, especially here for the palm house as well, where, like, you know, the Sephora tree was like mapped to the trunk, whereas here there was so much chaos in the palm house that the idea was like, okay, let's just project order, let's project grids, straight lines. And what happens when you do that is all the chaos way the light bends through it, it breaks it completely down. And you get all of these really amazing, beautiful patterns, which is it's an actual collaboration between the chaos of a plant and like the ordered patterns that I'm projecting upon. I love that. This space is great because it's like a 360. You can actually walk completely around it and see all kinds of different things. This is back to the large lake. So that's Longwood. It's open till the end of October. I would urge you to go see it because it is. I mean, watching a video is one thing, but seeing it in person's really spectacular. I mean, I've gone back after I've detached myself from it. So I kind of lived there all of June and then went crazy putting that up. I mean, it was nuts. It was really, like, from a process point of view, and I love what I do, it was so awesome. Like, I'd had a full team there. They'd have, like, one section set up. I had a little golf cart. I just rolled there with my laptop set up, map that for a little bit, go to another one. I mean, I remember I put on Instagram, like, I showed up to the topiary, and there was, like, a table set up. Projectors were all set up. All I had to do was like plop my laptop down. I'm like, this is the best office ever. Like, this is so awesome. So that's Longwood. And then I'm just gonna show one more video. And this is just to kind of, I just threw this in here because I just documented this. I was just at the Creative Capital Artist Retreat and promoting, I have another project we're working on for the future. Not gonna get into that. But it was really great. At the end of it, I actually was speaking to, they're called 23C. They're in the Midwest, and I was talking to the curator, and she's like, "Do you know anyone that does chandeliers?" It's like, "Oh, I did one for my studio for my studio party this last winter. I made this big video chandelier." And she's like, "Do you have any footage of it?" I was like, "I didn't even document it. It was a party. It was like whatever." But then I was like, "This will be perfect for your space." So we reinstalled it last week. I just thought I'd put something in here that's not Nightscape. That's something new, but it's really cool. So. This is our video chandelier, which is really cool because I'm once again utilizing space and making something to project on. So what this is a series of screens that the projector kind of shoots through. But what's so beautiful is when you go underneath it, you kind of hit this vortex in the middle, and it becomes super dimensional, like hyper 3D, no glasses, holographic. So we would play with like all of these different patterns upon it. And what's exciting is like that's what's so cool about this process. I have a studio, I come up with a stupid idea, we execute it, and the next thing you know, someone's commissioning a real piece. So this is being commissioned for real, and I'm very excited to put this out in the real world. As you can see, like we're moving the camera around. It's like it's a really nice piece. It's very dimensional, and I like it because it works on two levels. It looks, it looks beautiful from afar, but then when you walk underneath it, it completely transforms into this like super insane dimensional portal, which is really cool for me. So, thanks. If you want to see more work, you can go check it out on our website.